today. And our final main topic today gets submitted to us from Vinesh, who writes, "Greetings, John and crew. Just read in Variety that Sony is sitting out Comic-Con this year too. That makes Universal, Warner Brothers, and now Sony. Why do you think it is that so many major studios are not going to the biggest pop culture event of the year to promote their projects? It seems odd." All right. Thanks a lot for the message, Vinesh. And yeah, we've already known that Warner Brothers wasn't going, which I kind of think might be a little bit of a mistake. But we already knew that Universal wasn't going. And now Sony's announced that they're not going either. There's a couple of things and a couple of ways to look at this. Number one, is this a troubling trend? I had a friend of mine write to me and saying, these studios not going to Comic-Con. This is a troubling trend. I want to keep things in perspective here a little bit. Keep this in mind. We're only talking about Hall H presentations, because some people are worrying, because, when Marvel didn't go the one time or Warner Bros. Didn't go, no, does that mean everything's ending at Comic-Con? Even though Comic-Con's attendance keeps going up and up and up and up and up. You got to keep this in mind. These are Hall H presentations. Last year, about 200,000 people went to Comic-Con. Do you know how many people Hall H can hold? Hall H can hold 6,000. I won't make you do the math, but that's 3%. Only 3% of the people who go to Comic-Con were in Hall H when Marvel did their presentation, or when Warner Brothers did their presentation, or when Fox back in the X-Men days did their presentation. Only 3% of the people who were there got to see it anyway. One of the reasons I keep insisting they need to move Comic-Con out of San Diego, or at very least make Hall H the baseball stadium across the street at Petco Park, because that thing can hold like 50,000 people. Just make that Hall H anyway. So it's really only something that's going to affect 3% of the attendees, so it's not that big of a deal. That then does bring up the question, though, why? Why, Aaron? Why would like a Sony and a Warner Brothers and Universal not bring? And I think there's a couple of answers to that. Number one, I think they realize it is just one event. But that one thing of marketing is it's a logistical nightmare. Mm-hmm. You're trying to get all these major superstars to break their schedules, fly them into San Diego, put them up in $5,000 a night hotels to be there to do a 45-minute panel. When really, it usually ends up being about 15 minutes because, Marvel have like an hour and a half block, but they're doing 5 different movies doing it. So it's really not all for that long. Secondly, we just talked about this recently, Aaron, that Godzilla, has struggled at the box office since it came out. They dropped their first trailer for it a year ago at Comic-Con, had major buzz surrounding it, but it was too long ago. Mm-hmm. They blew their load too early, and the enthusiasm and the buzz eventually started to dissipate till they lost any benefit of it. What does Sony have coming out? Well, nothing except Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and that would play well at Comic-Con, but can you get Brad Pitt and Margot Robbie and Leonardo DiCaprio and Quentin Tarantino? Can you get them all together to be there for that? Maybe that was going to be a problem. Maybe that was going to be a bit of a hassle, and that's why I assume they tried to probably get them together for that, and when they realized they couldn't, they pulled the trigger and said, well, we're just not going to have a Hall H this year, and they let everybody know. So I don't think it's, number one, that big of a deal for Comic-Con. I don't think it's that big of a deal for a studio like Sony. But again, it just gives Marvel all the spotlight this year at Comic-Con. And by the way, nothing is stopping these other studios, Aaron, from dropping their own things online during Comic-Con that will still get a lot of attention. But it's going to be neat to see them getting Marvel's going to get all the spotlight this year, which I think they played on purpose, and they played it very well. Anyway, Aaron, you hear about this because I know you and I met at Comic-Con.
We did.
That's where we first met.
Comic-Con 2009,
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Woke up, said, who are you?
Wait, no, it must, yes, no, it was 2009.
It was 2009. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, that was 10 years. Mm-hmm. 10 years ago. Anyway, what do you think about this? Do you think, number one, for Comic-Con as a whole, do you think a studio like Sony, remember, they're not saying they're not going to have any presence there, just saying no Hall H presentation. And do you think maybe it hurts Sony at all to not do it? How do you see this?
No, I don't think it's a big deal at all, especially if they're still going to have a presence there. They're still going to have their huge booth, and they're going to have all their marketing materials, and everyone's going to know what's coming down the pipe for them.
And they may still do screenings as well.
Exactly. And I think that in the day of social media and with streaming and people being able to release things online, I just don't see it making that big of an impact. It is, like you said, a huge expense for the studio, a huge logistical problem. I can't see Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt being terribly excited about going to Comic-Con, to be honest. I feel like I just don't see them making it a priority. And also, I don't necessarily know if Once Upon a Time in Hollywood fits necessarily the Comic-Con mold so much. I just don't see it being that big of a deal. And I think that people who want to see those, want to support those projects, they absolutely will, but in a different way.
And it's funny because Quentin Tarantino did bring a film to Comic. They brought Django Unchained. I remember the year they did a big Django push. They had big tents outside in San Diego with all Django themed park and all this kind of stuff.
But do you think it made that big of a difference?
I think it did make a difference, but to your point, I think Django was more of a movie that was more suited to something like Comic-Con when you really look at Django as opposed to a Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But who knows? I guess we'll have to wait and see. And by the way, why did we meet at Comic-Con? Because you were there promoting your film. You guys were there promoting your film Bitch Slap at the time.
And we were not in Hall H, and we were still okay.
And you were not in Hall H, and it still worked out for you. Guys, what do you think about this move by Sony? Now that we have Sony, Universal, Warner Brothers not going to be there, do you actually think that has any sort of an impact on Comic-Con as a whole? And do you think this might be a mistake on the part of something like Sony? Or do you really not think it matters that much? Jump down in the comments section below and let me know what you think. All right, guys.